How do we raise our kids to have a positive Black identity and self-confidence when racism and anti-Black violence are so pervasive? Well, I want to introduce you to three dynamic Black moms who believe that they might just have the answer. These three women, Gladys, Aleatha, and Rachel, created Freedom Kilombo, a Black women-led homeschooling group in Wisconsin. This group developed out of their desire to really re-envision education for their children in a way that centers Blackness and highlights Black history around the world. Now look, I know you're probably still having nightmares from all of that e-learning that you did with your kids during COVID-19. But hear me out, because these women are among the 8% of US homeschoolers who are Black. And they are definitely getting it right because they use homeschooling as a tool of anti-racism. And they're sharing their knowledge and resources to guide other Black families to do the same. So why do they do it? How do they do it? If you want to know the answer to that, then don't go anywhere because I got the juice. So let me start off by introducing these amazing women. And I have to read this here because I want to make sure I get everything. I get everything right. Our first guest is Gladys, and Gladys is a political science who is an associate professor in the Department of African and African Diaspora Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She was the Brazilian Studies Association president from 2018 to 2020. And she's now the national co-coordinator of the United States Network for Democracy in Brazil. She's authored 3 books and published numerous academic articles on racial politics in Brazil. And she received her PhD from the University of Chicago, a Master's of Public Policy from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And she has a BA from Duke University. Go ahead and say hello, Gladys.
Hi.
And then now we have Aleatha. Aleatha is a homeschooling mom to 2 beautiful Black boys. She's passionate about homeschooling, especially when African and Afro-Diasporic experience, history, and culture are centered. She draws inspiration from her time spent in Ghana, West Africa, and the Montessori method of education. So she enjoys sharing her experiences as a Black homeschooling family to empower other Black families to consider or commit to homeschooling. And she also enjoys using social media to connect with and learn from other Black homeschooling families. And so we'll have her Instagram information available for you, for those of you who might want to reach out after this. And then last but not least, we have Rachel, who is a single parent with a strong village to a beautiful, bold, young person. She is a PhD candidate in the Department of Educational Policy Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her past research has actually focused on understanding the various ways that Black caregivers engage and advocate in schools for themselves, their children, and other children. Her experiences as a Black mother, coupled with her studies, have really fostered her interest in and out of school educational spaces and in reimagining learning for Black people. So she's currently studying Black homeschooling in the Midwest, which is really an asset to this whole episode. Rachel acknowledges her research, work, and parenting as part of a long tradition of Black people fighting for liberation. Did you want to say hello to the group, Rachel?
Hello.
And Aleatha, I don't think I gave you a chance to say hello to the group either, so could you say hello? All right.
Hi.
So thank you for that. So let's go ahead and get started. I don't want to do much talking because I believe that they probably have a lot to contribute to this conversation. So the first question that I often hear people ask about or be curious about is, what is it that initially motivated you to begin to homeschool your children or your child? And any of you can begin.
I will start.
Okay.
Okay, so we live in Wisconsin. That's my answer. Anyway, so many people know Milwaukee as being the worst place for Black people, for Black children. All of that is true. I'm not from here. So when we moved here, I started looking for a private school for our daughter. And we found one The resources looked great. At the time she was 3, so she started coming home saying things like, women can't be leaders. She started saying that she didn't want to be Black, that Black was bad, those type of things. And these were all unconscious things that she was learning from this private school. So of course, the teacher said, oh, we've never said anything like that. But we have always taught her about Black history. We've always embraced Blackness and of course, Black women. She's named after a Black woman leader. So we've taught her these things since she was a baby. So it was really shocking for me and really painful for my 3-year-old to come home saying these things. So we pulled her out of that school. They were very resistant. Another student called her a monkey. They still said that wasn't racist. So we pulled her out, put her in another private school. And at that one, the teacher said that she needed to play more with girls. Also at the other school, they said they always encouraged her to play in the kitchen area instead of building, which was the type of stuff that she liked to do as a kid. And so after having those experiences, I had already started thinking about homeschool, and after those experiences, I felt like really it was the only option. And I still feel like living in Wisconsin, that is the only option, especially for younger children. I think once you get older, you can handle racism more, or you can handle it better than being 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. And so, of course, she knows what racism is, but she's definitely better equipped now since she is older, even though she's only 6. But it's still not an experience that I want for a 6-year-old. So that's how I came to homeschooling, is that as long as we are in this type of state, that's the option that we have.
Wow. For our family, I guess it started, I've been teaching him things all his life. And so I think that's just where the homeschooling begins. Like, this isn't anything that is not familiar with us. It's just part of the parenting and homeschooling. And so seeing those things with a lot of overlap. But he was enrolled in daycare and was on the track to transition to kindergarten to our neighborhood elementary school. And as my bio states, I study education. And so with that, doing readings, having friends with Black children and hearing stories or even watching things on the news, I viewed schools with very suspicious about them as places and how they might, treat my son as he got older. And so when he was small, there wasn't too much of a concern, but there was definitely an awareness just based off of other people's stories. But he transitioned to kindergarten, and I was very, very present in that space because I wanted to make sure that, we were visible. This school was, it was majority students of color, but primarily white families in that school had a lot of power and control in terms of, the school events and the curriculum and how things looked. And so, I came up to the school. I like to volunteer just to be able to have an eye out, just realizing that if my son comes home from school, when I ask him how was school, it's going to be a couple of words. Or certain things will happen, but he wouldn't pick up on it or understand, like, oh, that's racist, until I might see it in a homework assignment about the American flag and what it symbolizes. And so his kindergarten experience, we didn't have direct issues with him and his learning. I actually liked his teacher as someone who was trying to be more socially conscious and have a social justice orientation to her teaching, but that ultimately wasn't supported in the school or anything that was like institutionalized. And so transitioning to first grade with another teacher that I felt like I had to protect him from kind of kept pushing me to think about homeschooling as a option. I heard about homeschooling. I knew that it was rising for Black families and that racism was a motivating factor. But for me, parenting, working, going to school, I didn't think it was a viable option, I guess. Trying to figure out how to juggle all of those things. And so I put it off until kind of feeling fed up with the school's unresponsiveness when I would try to come up to the school, have conversations with his teacher, trying to push back on like some of the things that she would say that were racist, problematic, and feeling not heard and wanting to ultimately protect him and affirm his identity. Like Gladys mentioned, like not wanting, you know, your young child to be exposed and be experiencing racism, although we know that's the reality for Black young people. Mm-hmm. And so I saw homeschooling as a way to be able to continue to do what I ultimately was doing with him at home. School was more so his supplement, and I was actually teaching him at home. And I didn't want to continue to waste energy going up to school or waste energy having him come home and then trying to have him unlearn things or unpack stuff, and I have to reteach him real history, for example. And so, you know, a lot of different things happened, but things came together and we decided to take the leap and homeschool, knowing that it was uncertain, but realizing that what we knew for certain was school just wasn't the place for us.
Thank you.
So for my family, like Rachel mentioned, I think before even having children, we kind of knew that they would go to school and that would just be something that they did, but the real learning would happen at home with us, and we would teach them and, you know, unprogram the things that they would learn in school. It was just something we took for granted that they would just go to school when we have kids. But we'll supplement, actually, like Rachel said, school will be the supplement to the education, the true education that we were giving them at home. So when my oldest became school age, we sent him to a Montessori school, which, you know, we really believed in the Montessori method and philosophy of like young, early education, kind of hands-on life learning. So we sent my oldest to a Montessori school for 2 years. He did K3 and K4, which is kind of like, I guess it would be kind of like a Head Start and then pre-K. And then I did not have any personal negative experiences with the school. I loved it. I loved his teacher. His teacher loved him. It was really nice to see him kind of blossom because he's a bit reserved around strangers. So it was kind of nice to see that happen. But, you know, it was, the homeschooling buzz was still happening around us and within our household. And honestly, we just got thrown into a room with other families that were interested in homeschooling, and it just became more and more and more of like a pull and a like, yeah, we got to do this. We can do this. Yeah, let's do this. And so that's really how it happened for us. Like once we together, and Rachel and Gladys was a part of that, once we kind of had steam from just that movement of others being like, yeah, we're going to do this. We was like, we are too, you know, so that was it.
That's amazing. So what I want to do, you all, can I have, when other people are talking, I want to make sure that you're on mute so that we don't have any kickback. I wanted to hear a little bit more about this structure, because one of the things that I think I found unique is that you do have a type of community structure. It's not just you homeschooling your kids, but you all work together. So can one of you describe what this structure is like? How does it function?
I can take it. Okay, so I really think about our group as kind of a club. So it's not a formal co-op. Of course, Rachel studies this, so she can go into more detail about kind of structures and co-ops of homeschool groups. But ours, I think, of more as a club, an enrichment club. So we come together, of course, pre-COVID, 5 days a week, with Friday being the like a free day in terms of that's when we do field trips. But so then Monday through Thursday, we are doing activities that are in addition to our kind of one-on-one homeschooling, with our children. And in that group, we have a number of topics that we cover. So for example, I teach Portuguese, math, science, and then we kind of have a unit that, we might do for 2 or 3 months and then switch to another one. So we did coding and economics. And then Aleatha teaches math. Aleatha teaches Spanish and reading and writing. And then Rachel teaches, she does kind of art, health, Black history. So the nice thing is just what Aleatha just said. It kind of just all came together. And I was really, really grateful that I was able to connect with other Black women to do this. So, when I found out that they wanted to do it without hesitation, I was just like, this is great, like we should do it. So basically we were able to form this group and we all kind of, decided, oh, well, I would like to do this. I would like to do this. And they're fabulous. So, it's not like I was going to say, oh no, you can't do that or anything. Like everyone does so well. And I think they really, we're able to kind of play to our strengths. So I'm super excited about math. So let's do some math, or if someone else is excited about something, then that's what we do. If the kids really if they have an interest in whatever it is, then we can always follow, their interest as well. So.
Wow, that's amazing. So what has been one of the most challenging parts of this experience?
Yeah, I was going to speak to that because Aleatha and Gladys both just said, it came together, and I said that too. And it's just, I look back on it, just how our lives crossed at such a very important moment for each of us. And so, that aligned well, but creating this learning space, and as we do it as a group in our homeschooling group, and then also at home, it's a lot of work. And so it's not just like, oh yeah, it just fell into our laps. We be putting in a lot of work to make sure that, activities get done, that we have supplies and materials, and also being responsive to what they want to do and what they want to, what they're interested in. And so I think that one of the things that could be challenging is trying to force the learning or force things to happen in our space together or at home. And so realizing that doesn't have to be a challenge, and like Gladys said, taking their lead on things that they're interested in. Another part of the group learning that we do is having self-directed education weeks, and so having them plan their own days where they pick the activities that we do, and it's nice to have that. They give a lot of input regardless, but for that week they share what they want to do and they plan the day, and everyone is really interested and engaged, and they listen to each other well. And so I appreciate that as well, just being able to get kind of an insight into them as teachers as well, because I think that just through this whole experience, it's been a challenge, and I keep learning things as the weeks go by, learning things from my son, learning things from the other young people in the space, and also learning from both of these two mamas.
Aleatha?
Yeah, so I would say for me, the most challenging thing is really trying to respect that agency of my children, and allowing them to contribute into, what their learning looks like. It's a constant thing that I have to remind myself not to bring that school system into my home. It's like it's not a sit down and do this worksheet. And, sometimes I just have to, as a parent and a person, just respect what's happening, respect the energy that's happening in front of you. And if they're not with it, they're not with it. Because sometimes, you know, it's easy for me to go into teacher mode and be like, complete the assignment. But that is, I would say, the most challenging thing is to always be reflective and make sure that I'm not doing the damage that I was trying to protect them from.
Wow, that's big. That's really big right there. So, you know, when you were talking about really not playing into the same things that you critiqued from the school system, can we talk a little bit more about how you all incorporate anti-racist teaching into the curriculum, and even beyond anti-racist, but even just Afro-Diasporic perspectives? How are they integrated into your approach?
So I would say in our group schooling with Freedom Kilombo, what we do is, if it's math, like maybe the names are African names, the objects is an ankh, you know, we're counting ankhs instead of cherries, you know. So we always try to incorporate just African or African American or Brazilian kind of material into just like all of the concepts. And like in our reading, you know, we're doing reading, they're at the end of the readings, they're having to answer questions. So they're getting that aspect of reading comprehension and critical thinking, but the subject matter is always like African or African American countries, people. So far we've done countries. Last year we did countries. This year we kind of focused on biographies. So that's kind of, and then with the subjects that Rachel teaches, you know, she teaches different African languages like Swahili, and then she also teaches with art is always accompanied with a Black artist that is featured in whichever medium that she's doing. So if we're doing sculptures, it was
Augusta Savage.
Oh,
no,
Augusta Savage. Alma Thomas was the collage maker,
yes,
right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so sorry about that. It was Augusta Savage. But, you know, so she always accompanies it with like a Black artist. And so we just try to Blackify everything that we do, is like just kind of bring that into, you know, the subject matter that we're teaching. Gladys, when she does different science units, we'll learn about a Black chemist, we'll learn about a Black mathematician to go along with it, learn about a Black physicist or Black doctors. Like, so we always just try to incorporate that into the subject matter.
That's amazing. I mean, I love how you said Blackify it. I don't know if that's an official word, but it will be for this episode. So, and it sounds like what I found interesting is that you've mentioned now, I think, 3 different languages. I heard Portuguese, Spanish, and I think I even heard Swahili. So how do you all make decisions about language? Will the kids learn all 3 languages throughout? Will the languages change? How did you all make that decision?
So for me, you know, since I studied Brazil, that was the language that I wanted to bring to the group. And the other thing too that's nice about teaching Portuguese is, again, I can always bring in, you know, Black leaders from Brazil. I can teach them. So I've taught them about Marielle Franco. Actually, we did a unit on Marielle Franco, and then this was during COVID. So then I mailed everyone buttons of Marielle Franco buttons. They've learned about Zumbi. So I knew, of course, Portuguese is, you know, a language that I speak, but also it would allow me to bring in, again, these Black heroes and, you know, and others that we could study.
Yeah, you know, what's interesting about what you're saying is that a lot of people don't even realize that Brazil is this country that has so many people of African descent. And so, what's also interesting is that, I mean, full disclosure, Gladys and I have worked together on issues related to Brazil for a long time, probably almost a decade or so. But what's interesting is that people don't know who these leaders are. And sometimes folks in Brazil aren't even necessarily exposed to other Afro-Brazilians who are leaders. So it's really great to see how you're trying to create this diasporic community and really try to incorporate that into everything that you're doing. Rachel, did you want to add anything to that, or you feel like they covered most of it?
Since Gladys teaches Portuguese, Aleatha teaches Spanish, and they both know that language, studied it. For Swahili, that is nothing that I grew up learning or being aware of. And I think our introduction into it was learning about Kwanzaa and like the different principles. And so that was something that we also focused on at Freedom Kilombo, is learning the different principles, what they mean, and then also how they apply, whether that would be using like a small activity or thinking about a proverb. And so just thinking about them learning those words and then realizing that Swahili is a African language that's common across lots of different countries. And so wanting to bring that in through different books. And so it might be a book that focuses on like Moja means one. So there's that, like counting, and so learning the numbers. And so it's a nice introduction into Swahili. And we would continue, the goal is to continue learning through different ways, but also connecting with other people that are actually fluent in the language.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. You know, one of the things that we've talked about is this idea. One of the reasons why I really like the idea of having the three of you here is because this idea of community is so important to the YouTube channel. It's all about Black families and Black communities. And what we haven't talked about is the response to your maybe extended families to you homeschooling. Right? Are they as supportive as you are? Are they skeptical? I just want to kind of hear more from you all about how other people in your family might be responding to this decision that you've made to homeschool.
Okay, I guess I'll take that one. So I'm pretty much, you know, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So I don't really know the response of my family. You know, I have 3 sisters, so of course I have a twin sister, so I'm sure she wasn't surprised. And all 3 of them knew about what was, you know, going on in, you know, in terms of the past experiences that my daughter had. So I didn't hear any negative responses from them, but again, my sisters know me, so they know if I decided I'm going to homeschool, that's what I'm going to do. It doesn't matter what anyone says, of course, besides Anthony, but he was also on board. You know, again, we felt like we have no other alternatives, right? So the community or the city that we lived in was majority white, so the schools were majority white. So, you know, the problems would have been the same. It's just that it would have, you know, went from private school to a public school. You know, whenever my sisters and, you know, I'm thinking like immediate family, they can see how well my daughter is doing. So yeah, there hasn't really been any questioning. This was really more for me because sometimes I get a little stressed out, like, is she learning enough and things like that. I'm less stressed now, but a year ago, I was pretty stressed. And so we had her tested at Northwestern. They have a Center for Talent Development. So, you know, she did the gifted test or whatever there. She did great. So now she's able to enroll in gifted programs there. So, and again, it's not like I was trying to validate this for other people. It was really more of a personal thing that I needed to make sure that it was okay, that, you know, that she was learning. Of course, that's, you know, it's clear to me, but as my husband can tell you, sometimes I just get, I guess, a little concerned, too concerned when I really don't have to be concerned. Of course she's learning. So yeah, I guess that's how I would answer the question is, I just haven't heard anything negative. If anything negative has been said, I just haven't heard it. And yeah, I made the decision, so that's what's going to happen. It really doesn't matter what anyone else says.
That's great. That's great. What about you two, Rachel and Aleatha?
For us, I mean, whenever something would go down at my son's school, I would, text about it in like our family chat. So everyone was really aware in terms of what was going on at school and things that I had to, put up with, deal with, or try to like figure out a solution to. And so it didn't really, there wasn't like much of a response that I can recall when I made the decision and like announced and let people know like, oh, I'm not sending him back to school, we're gonna homeschool. Everything was generally positive, except for my dad, who questioned, he wondered whether or not, like, how would he be learning, or, what about his learning? And so we had to have conversations in terms of like, school does not mean learning, school does not equal education. And so trying to really de-school and think about those things and break down this idea that learning happens just in that school, and also that I'm not capable of teaching, or that learning doesn't happen just naturally and everywhere. And so that was his initial response. And, he raised 6 daughters, and he was very, very active with also coming up to the school and saying things and making sure that his kids were challenged and stuff like that. So I understood where he was coming from. I was taken aback, but he has definitely come around, and he's also involved with the homeschooling. He teaches my son cornet and piano, and so, he likes to be involved in that. And he's also sat in on some of like the virtual Kilombo sessions that we have, and he'll text the group like, there's some great things happening in Kilombo, and I'm just like, see, so he came around, and I knew he would, but I think it was just, this initial idea of school is where we learn, or that homeschooling is just something that people don't really know about, or there's misconceptions. And so we just had to break that down a little bit. But overall, people are like amazed, this is inspirational, things like that. And so.
That's great. Aleatha, what about you?
So I think my family, much like Gladys, I have a good track record of what I'm gonna do, it, and I'm okay without your input. And I think that I've proven to them time and time, like, to trust my decision making. So I have had a lot of choices, decisions, and that have been like alternatives. I guess not really the average and common ways that my family was used to. Mm-hmm. So by the time homeschooling came to the plate, they already knew that that's what I was going to do. It wasn't even, it wasn't even unexpected for them. It was like, oh, okay. Makes sense according to how you live. That makes sense. And so, they're supportive in that way. They, I never got any negative feedback or anything, but I would say, like, as far as like support involvement, I don't think many people know how to be involved with supporting homeschooling families. And I would say for my family, especially, like, just thinking of the members of my family, they don't know. And sometimes, I might get, the best I could get is like a phone call, like, I saw these tickets, do you want me to get them for you? Or, you know what, my mother-in-law, she actually has, through her job, she gets like corporate things sometimes, like maybe materials like resources, tools or something, and she'll give me a bunch, whether it's helpful or not. Sometimes the other moms know about it. Sometimes I'm just like, all right, let me put this over here because it's not helpful, but I know you're trying to be helpful, So that's about the response that we've gotten is, they don't know how to help, but if they could, their heart is in the right place where they might want to help. But other than that, it's just a lot of praise.
Wow, that's really great to hear that overall it seems like there's been a lot of positive encouragement. You all haven't talked as much about your partners. So for those of you who have partners, tell me a little bit more about the role that they play. Is this a dual couple process, or does one person do most of the work?
Okay,
I'm glad I have any problems here.
I'm glad I was on mute because I was laughing. No, in terms of, so for Kilombo, that is Black women led. Okay. I don't know if it's intentional, but that's what it is, which is great for me. So in terms of the homeschooling at home, so my husband helps with Kumon. So Kumon is like a supplemental math reading program. He does a lot of that with my daughter. but everything else, like our one-on-one learning, that's me. Also taking her, again, pre-COVID, taking her to various places, since she does a lot of other, additional things. So she also does Mandarin. So that's me taking her there. Ballet, that's me taking her there. Violin, that's me taking her there. For her Saturday class, that's so Anthony does or my husband does the Saturday activities. But of course, now that we have COVID, that's online. So, that's just, setting up the computer or whatever. But otherwise, a lot of it is me. So.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna leave that question like that, so I don't cause any problems. But when people do homeschooling, it seems as though there's sometimes an expectation that it's a type of village situation. So whether it's a parent, whether it's a grandparent, and I think Rachel, you mentioned that your father gets involved with some of the music classes, and then Aleatha, you mentioned that some people want to help, but they just don't quite know what to contribute. If you had families like that, if somebody was a relative of a couple or family that was homeschooling, what is the advice that you would give them? What do homeschooling families need?
Let me just address the spousal support or spousal involvement in homeschooling. So I think, a lot of our learning in the home is not necessarily at the table with workbooks, So my husband, he does a very good job of interlacing lessons in the fantastical stories that he makes up throughout the day on a car ride, or, if we're, just being outside. He always finds a way to kind of incorporate some kind of learning or lesson into it. So if we were to call what I do in terms of ensuring that they are exposed to different subject matter, content and stuff, if we were to call that formal homeschooling, he does a lot more of the informal homeschooling, or home learning. I like to call it learning. I really try to keep school out of our house. So,
Wow. Okay.
we do a lot. He does a lot of the informal, like home learning. And he very much gives me the reign of control in terms of just like everything, the design of it, the decisions that's being made. But he's very supportive. And with our group school in Kilombo, I think when we first started, I imagined that the dads would maybe even teach a class or have more participation. I did imagine that, but that's just not the way that it happened, and it works fine. One time we had Gladys's husband as a substitute, and that was really fun, and the children enjoyed it. And my husband, he's around, because if we're in my house, he's around sometimes, and he's very interactive with the children. So they all know each other, and they're no stranger to Kilombo. It's not like they're, get out of here, dads. What are you doing here? But they're involved still, even though they're not the main instructors of our group schooling. And then, like I said, in my home and our individual learning, dad does play a major role in that.
I had an interview with another Black mom who homeschools, and I asked her what's a piece of advice that she would give to other people who might be thinking about this. And she said, and this is a surprising answer, she said, be sure to protect your mental health. And she repeated that over and over again. And I thought, wow, she's really trying to stress the importance of protecting your identity and mental health. And that wasn't something that I think even now I completely understand the importance of. So I was hoping you all could maybe speak to why she might have been so insistent on talking about mental health and her personal identity.
So I think that's really, really important. You know, so I also work, right? I'm a professor, and that doesn't mean that you are just teaching classes. That means you teach, you also have to do service, and it means you have to do research. So that means if I'm homeschooling a full day, then when do I do my work? And sleep. So something isn't going to happen, right? And I need to do my work. So it means that sometimes I don't get a lot of sleep, which of course I know that that's unhealthy, but I also exercise 5 days a week, right? So even if I'm getting 5 hours of sleep, I'm going to exercise. You know, that's just my commitment to myself. But I do think that mental health is very important. And for me, it's always surprising that I don't see a lot of discussion around that. Oftentimes, I want to talk to Black homeschooling parents who, you know, have children who are in college. And I want to ask questions like, do your kids still like you? Really? Because you are with your kids so much, right? And, you know, of course, I've seen YouTube videos where people have an image where, oh, it's so great. No, it's not great all the time. It's gotten better, but before, I would say for the first year, maybe I enjoy, now our Kilombo is different. Every single day I enjoy Kilombo. But when it's one-on-one, for my first year, I would say maybe I enjoyed 3 to 4 days. And I'm talking about for the entire year. Like truly enjoyed it. That's gotten better. You know, maybe that's increased to 10 days. I don't know. But again, I'm talking about, you know, like you enjoy the entire day, right? You're going to have moments like, oh yeah, 2 minutes, that was great. But if we're talking about entire days, no, honestly, I cannot say that I enjoy one-on-one every single day, right? And that's because we're, you know, and I think it's great that both Aleatha and Rachel talked about the aspect of you want to make sure that you're listening to your kid, right? So if my kid is complaining, I need to respond to that, right? So that maybe that means, okay, today we only get through science. You want to read? Okay, read. You know, if you want to read 2 to 3 hours, and sometimes that's what my daughter does. But she's not complaining. That's what she, you know, truly wants to do. That just means the next day that, you know, we have to finish those other activities. So again, I think for me, that's also part of the mental health aspect, is that every day isn't going to be enjoyable. And so for me, actually homeschooling has really helped me to appreciate life more, because I don't plan for a year ahead. I plan for the next minute. Is the next minute enjoyable? It's, you know, am I going to have moments of happiness today? And if I do, that's great. I'm having a great day. I cannot plan to have a full day of happiness homeschooling. And I actually like to work. I like to do research. I like to write. So I'm not going to be very happy if I can't do my own work, you know, in terms of writing, if I can't do that for a week or 2 weeks or a month. That is not satisfying. And for me, my professional job is much easier, way easier than homeschooling. I mean, if I just had free time to write, oh my gosh, I would do that all the time. So it's a balancing act. But again, I do think we have to put our health ahead. And so that's why for me, you know, it's like 5 days a week, I'm going to exercise. It's going to happen. So I do think that is something important, and that we don't have to act like every day is joyous. It's not. If you get a minute that's joyous, that's great. For me, you know, of course it's going to differ for other people. But personally, homeschooling has helped me to see that, right? You have to enjoy every minute of life. You have to enjoy whatever you can get out of it.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel Gladys too with the work, school, finding time to write, do my own stuff, but then also parent and homeschool. And it is a lot and it's stressful and it's a juggle. And so I think that also part of it, mental health is really important. And I have been getting better. So we're moving into our third year homeschooling. And so thinking about where I was maybe the first day in the first year, me trying to do different things to try to reprioritize my mental health and wellness, because that's something that is really, really important. And so, you know, we all talked about some days where, you know, they might not want to do something. And so listening to them and then just doing it the next day. But there's also some days where I don't want to do something, and like giving myself that grace and not, you know, stressing out or being like, oh, you failed or you didn't do this and, you know, you're a bad mother or a bad educator. But recognizing that, you know, if I'm just not feeling it, or if I need a second or moment or a day to just take care of myself, then allow myself to do that, because we can always do it later on. We can do it the next day. And so being responsive to his needs, but also mine. And also that's one of the parts of teaching that I think is important. So being able to model that and not wanting him to like pick up these behaviors where he feels like he needs to, you know, just produce all the time, because it's just not healthy. And it's something that I've been trying to disrupt internally with myself. And so modeling it, doing things. And so during the summer, we started doing some more mindfulness activities. And so like trying to incorporate some of those things to just acknowledge that mental health is something that is important, and normalizing these conversations and realizing that there's space needed to really have those conversations, and not something that he should learn when he's an adult and juggling a whole bunch of tasks as well.
Yeah, great. Aleatha?
So I would say for me, one of the things that I had to do, so I'm a stay-at-home mom, and so that just means I'm on all the time. So there's homeschool and there's just home. You know, like I'm on all the time. There's no, you know, when the weekend comes, you still at work, you know? So I've had to, and my husband, again, like as helpful as he is with the boys' learning, he's very helpful with making sure that I'm taking time for myself. And, you know, he helps out around the house. He tries to lighten my load as much as he can. And one thing that I'm very successful at is I do take a day off. I take Friday, Saturday off, like especially Saturday. Saturday I'm off. I'm not waking up early. I'm not making breakfast. I'm not making coffee. I'm not doing it. Like,
good for you.
So he respects that, even though it's, you know, like pre-COVID when he was like out of the house, you know, it's like, all right, well, this is, you know, one of his days off too. It's like, he knows if I don't get this day off, I don't get any days off. So he's very good with that. And then also, you know, I just got to kind of make choices. So sometimes, you know, maybe I didn't go on a family bike ride. You know why? Because I finally get to be home alone by myself. No one's here. It's just me. So, you know, sometimes I have to be forced to go take a nap. You know, I'll be like dragging around here doing all of the things. And I'm just like, but I'm so tired. Oh, I got this to do and I got that to do. And he's like, why? Like, sit down, go, I'll do it. You know, so he's very helpful with helping me to protect my sanity, energy, and, you know, my mental space. Other than that, like, yeah, that's kind of how I do it.
Wow. You know, I want to go back a bit, because one of the things that, maybe it was Rachel who mentioned this, is that initially, I think, Rachel, you were saying your dad was concerned. And one of the concerns that people have about homeschooling is that you don't know how to evaluate your child, or you don't have a formal way of evaluation, or a state-sanctioned way of evaluation, people say. And so I wanted you all to talk a bit about how you track the progress of your child, or is that even how you think about this, right? Do I need to be deschooled, right? So how do you approach this question of evaluating whether or not your kid is learning? We have these state standards. Do you use those at all? Talk us through some of that.
I would say, speaking on a general level, that the first thing is you need to consult your state's laws, because that can look different for, depending on where you live. Here in Wisconsin, we don't have like standardized testing that homeschoolers have to meet, or this is, the levels that you have to perform at and have this portfolio. Like, I know a lot of other states do those benchmarks, but we don't. What we do is we submit an affidavit with our intention to homeschool in the beginning of the year, basically swearing that we are going to teach math, reading, science, well, not reading, it would be ELA, science, health, I missed one, right? Social studies. I think those 5 general, and we're going to do it for a certain amount of hours. We're going to satisfy these hours, and you just make the commitment. And so then at that point, it's really up to the different families. Some families choose to have their child standardized tested to make sure that they're keeping up with the benchmarks of public and private schools. Some parents choose not to at all. I think that's something that we discuss and kind of mulled over when we were at the beginning of our homeschooling journey. Like, well, as long as they're meeting these bench points, we're good, make sure that they're doing this. And then it was like, we really had to reassess, like, why are we taking them out of school? Like, why are we not, well, we took one out, my youngest son, he never went into school. But it's like, if we're just going to be striving to reach these arbitrary benchmarks, then, what are we doing for ourselves? So for us, we kind of had to shift our camera lens, shift the way that we were looking at things, and what does success mean? What does learning mean? And so, it's a very like a feel, it's like we observe our children, we see where they're falling weak, we see the developments that's happening, sometimes even if you're just like questions they might ask, or ways that they might answer a question that they previously answered a different way. So it's just a lot of observation. And for me also, it is seeing them know and master something that I know you did not know that, so I'm just like, yeah, I did that, So those are like the kind of successes that, I use as like, are they learning? Yeah, they are.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, with us thinking about that, just having a broader and continuing to broaden my understanding of like learning and like what success looks like and where we should be at. So I don't really refer to the, state guidelines in terms of what third graders should be learning at this point. Like they should be able to do X, Y, and Z. I might refer to it because I'm curious to see like, okay, what are they saying that, my son should be learning at this time? But it's nothing that guides are learning at home. To think about it just more specific with the topic, math. And so when he was in school doing math and learning math, that was a struggle area for him. And his teachers understanding like how math is taught, and it's very comprehensive, and so concepts build on each other. And so if you're only understanding so much of subtraction and then you're moving on to multiplication and then division, you're going to have these gaps in your learning. And so that was one thing that I knew he had like some concern about, or was self-conscious when it came to math as a topic. But since pulling him out of school and homeschooling, the most I've done for him is like found just an online, because there's so many free things online. Let's get that out there. Like, even if you didn't want to write your own stuff, you can Google and come up with a whole bunch of free resources that you can tailor to your liking. And so I found just like an at-home assessment for third grade math. And so I introduced it to him. We worked on it over a couple of days, but I told him like, this isn't a test, but I just want to I just want to know what you know and what you don't, so I can help you and support your learning. And so if you don't get it, it's fine. Just move on to the next thing. And so that was just helpful, just to realize kind of some concepts that he didn't know, so I could go back and reteach those areas and help build his confidence. And he has grown a lot in that area. And I think that when you're following those state, like you're following things that are standardized in schools, or if you're assigning grades and stuff like that, that is just not fair and is detrimental to young people, because, you know, had he stayed in school, it's possible and very, very likely that as he progressed and was in math, that he might have been labeled like a C student or like an average student in math. And like that's what he would have been known as, or what he would think his potential would be. When in reality, maybe a concept just wasn't introduced properly, or was introduced too soon. And so I think that having just that opportunity to really work with them, look at how they're learning and how they're growing, and then being able to realize, okay, you get this, and so this is good and we can move on, versus trying to like every single week we have to like follow this curriculum to make sure that you're learning everything that you need to learn in third grade.
Right.
It just didn't make sense. And so it's interesting to refer to, and the deschooling thing is a whole process, because I go back and forth sometimes where I know like there are some things that you need to learn just living here as a Black person in the United States, but resisting and not wanting to do that schooling stuff, you know, at home. And so it's a balance, but definitely don't let it lead us.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to hear a bit more about that. You know, you all have a clear agenda, which is to center Blackness, Afro-Diasporic experiences. Tell us a bit more about, you know, there's a lot, for example, happening in current events as it relates to police brutality, violence. To what extent do you introduce these ideas into your curriculum or into the learning day?
So I want to answer that one, especially given the previous experience, you know, that my daughter had. You know, so it's not like I could say, oh, I'm not going to expose her to what it means, you know, to what racism and discrimination is. She experienced it at 3 years old, right? So, you know, maybe I could choose to say, oh, well, it wasn't that, it was just, you know, X, Y, Z. No, that is what it is. Just today, we were talking with a friend who was telling us about an experience that his son had, and they are in Brazil. And my daughter, she said, oh, that's discrimination. She's 6. She knows what it is. I am not shy about letting her know this country's history. I'm not shy about letting her know what has happened in other countries, what has happened in countries in Africa, on the continent, right? So she knows what colonialism is. It, you know, was great when Aleatha last year, when she taught them about different countries in Africa. And then, you know, they talked about how borders were formed. And so this also reminds me of, you know, when we were talking about how you have to kind of re-educate your children. So we have some workbooks, and she was doing one workbook. I think she was studying Latin America. And she was like, but wait a minute, these borders were due to, you know, colonialism or Europeans stealing Native American people's land, right? So she knows what that is. And for me, it's really important. Sometimes I actually have her to read portions of a textbook that I teach to my undergraduate students. So, you know, she reads really well. I'm not going to hide that from her. Now, if it's a really, really heavy topic, I will put it in, you know, a 6-year-old language or something. But I think it's really, really important to teach Black children about our history, right? And that history doesn't always look good. And even when, I think I sent Rachel an email where I was responding to something, but I was, you know, getting concerned again that, you know, my daughter wasn't learning enough about geography or something. And so when I started telling her about the United States, I was basically telling her about imperialism, right? So I just put it in vocabulary that she would understand. So I think those things are very important, and so of course I'm doing that at home, but we also bring that into Kilombo. And again, it's at a level that children would understand. But also this is something that Rachel just mentioned, right? When you have a Black kid, there are certain things they need to know. Like they need to know it for their life to survive. And especially in a place like Wisconsin, right? So the United States, other countries, of course, there's anti-Blackness. But for me, not being from here, this is a very special place and not special in a good way. But in a place to where you need to be able to navigate the place or the city, the state, and to be able to survive, right? So I think being able to name racism and discrimination is really important for Black children. Otherwise, they internalize it and they think that it's their fault, right? So maybe they are at a school and something's happening and then they're going to say, oh, but I wasn't doing X, Y, Z. No, you need to know that something called institutional racism. You need to know what structural racism is, right? And it's everywhere. So I think it's really an advantage to Black children, no matter how old they are. Again, this happened when she was 3, so it's not like I could sugarcoat it. It is what it is. So yes, I integrated. I have the Race and Racism Encyclopedia. My daughter has thumbed through that, and I'm like, this is the country that we live in, and this is what's going on in the world. So for me, it's really, really important.
Can the others of you speak to some of the things that you feel Black kids just need to know, or that and your child in particular needs to know? What are some of the lessons that you feel you're trying to convey to them?
I would say for me, in anything that I teach them around, I want to teach them that Black is not inferior. I feel like they get that in America. We get that message through like every medium, and it just crosses, it crosses genres, and it's just like, it's always some way to kind of weave in inferiority in Black culture. And so for me, in our house, Blackness is celebrated. I grew up, my mother, I remember she told me a story about her grandmother on her knees in a department store digging to find a Black doll because there was like no Black dolls. Mm. And so she explained to me as a girl, like, that's why it was important that I had dolls that looked like me. And so I have boys, and I make sure that their earliest superheroes that they played with were the Black ones. I didn't even know who Falcon was. I didn't care. It was the only Black superhero on the shelves at the time. And I had to make sure that that's the one that they're going to have. Like, they didn't know about Superman until like years later, So I just make sure that those early images that they identify with and pretend with are Black. Our bookshelf, our children's books are Black, 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 Black. I make sure that anything African that we bring in this house is not animal themed. Mm. I make sure that anything is humanized. Mm. So that is, I think, what I think is most important for them, is that I give them that foundation where when they encounter any sense of inferiority or any message that this is inferior, they're just like, what are you talking about? I want it to be so foreign to their understanding that they are well aware someone is playing a joke on them.
Wow, that's great. Rachel, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just want to echo a lot that both Gladys and Aleatha said in terms of what I teach or what I want my son to know. Obviously, we talked about Kilombo and like centering Blackness and like that being a very, very intentional thing, but also just having Black educators. Knowing that, you know, the lineup at his elementary school was a bunch of white women, that was something that I didn't want him to have that lack of representation, lack of connection by looking at these white people that were in these positions. And ultimately like these authority positions over him. And so having Black teachers and me being able to teach him, I think that that's just one part of like caring, parenting, and homeschooling learning. When I said like there's all that overlap, and that's part of what I mean, to just show that, you know, we're educators, we've been teaching, you know, our children, our communities, and like, just because it's not represented in schools or in other spaces, then that doesn't mean that we don't create stuff and that we don't know stuff. And so being very intentional about who can be in spaces with him or what spaces we'll go in now, especially since we started homeschooling, it's very, very important to make sure that it's Black affirming spaces, and to really try to combat all of the racism and these ideas of us being inferior, and to really try to combat that. And so having conversations about racism and discrimination, as Gladys said, like experiencing it and having to call it out, or even being, you know, grocery shopping and having an incident. And so like in the moment doing something and then having to debrief in the car to like explain why we did that or why I said that or why they did what they did. It's all part of learning, and it's trying to like, again, also let him know, like, you know, these are things that unfortunately we have to encounter, but here's also how you handle those situations. And also it's nothing that's wrong with us, it's what's wrong with them and what they're doing. And so we've participated in protests, like he's aware about Black Lives Matter, the movement, the founders. And so making sure that we have those conversations too about police brutality, and having to do that to counter his old school talking about police protecting and serving. And so it's just kind of, you know, very, very dangerous teaching that could, you know, just dangerous teaching. And so trying to make sure that he's aware, informed, let him know about these different things, but also affirm that Black is beautiful, that there's Black joy, that Black people existed before we were brought to the United States, and that learning about the different countries in Africa and just highlighting all those other aspects is something that was important. And just thinking about our bookshelves too, they're full of Black people, because that's what I need you to know. That's what is important to us. And so,
Yeah.
No, that's
Can I just add to that?
sure.
I think one thing that, actually I think all of us do, well, we do this in Kilombo, but I think also in our individual households, that we normalize Blackness, right? So what I heard Rachel and Aleatha say, right, is our bookshelves are full of books on Black people. And of course mine is the same, right? Even my personal books, right? Because that's the work I do. I do work on Black people. But I think it's very important, right, that for them, and I can see this, right, that Blackness is normalized, and it's normalized in a positive way, right? So it's not for, you know, I think it's great that, you know, when we're teaching, since it is so Black focused, it won't be surprising for them if they go out into the world and they hear about Black scientists and Black mathematicians. They're going to think, well, of course, right? So, but all of those, and I think you really have to be strategic. It's so easy, I think, for Black parents who, if you're just, you know, sending your kid to school, you do have to do the extra work. And my parents had to do the extra work of making sure we, you know, my dad would assign books by Black authors that we had to read and then discuss with him. So if you're not doing all of that extra work, then Blackness is not, it will not be normalized. Your kid will not think that it's normal to have Black people doing all of these great things throughout the world, right? Not just in the US, but everywhere for a very long time. So I also think that is, you know, that people have to be intentional and strategic, but along with all of these other things, to make sure that we are combating racism and combating, you know, these notions of inferiority. If Blackness is normalized and centered, then all of those other things is easier for us to challenge all of the other isms.
Yeah, you know, I really like what you were saying, and in a lot of ways, I see myself in the example that you gave. Our son goes to public school, and we just do a lot of the deschooling, the deprogramming at home. So and I think Aleatha mentioned this. We kind of consider public school. I mean, he goes there, but we're the ones actually teaching him things. But that also means that we have to unteach these negative ideas. And I think that a lot of parents are in this situation, especially actually people in my friendship group. We complain about public school, sometimes even private school, and all the labor it takes to give our kids the education that we think that they need. And so I think that this will be really helpful for our subscribers to kind of hear how you all hear the challenges that you all are facing and how homeschool actually helps you to address them. I know that you all have a lot to do, so I don't want to keep you for too much longer, but I do want to end on a positive note for you so I want you to tell us about examples of how rewarding this has been for you. So if you have an example that you can give to the subscribers about how you knew that this was something that has been effective, what's something that's been rewarding about this experience for you?
Okay, so I think for me, what has been rewarding is, and the nice thing is, so this was even before my daughter began private school. We moved, and I was just looking through some old stuff I had, and I had this booklet of like these science experiments that we did together. So, you know, it was like I was already doing homeschool before she even started.
Yeah.
So for me, what has been really nice and rewarding is that I can see what she's interested in. And, you know, beyond academics, I think one of the most rewarding things for me is really she has this commitment to social justice. And she just has a very keen sense of knowing when something is not right. And it could be in any aspect, right? It could be, you know, she might see that someone is being mistreated or something, or near Easter, a bird ran into our window. And we thought it was bad. Fortunately, it wasn't. But my daughter was just so upset and so caring of this bird. And you know, so it really ranges, just like you know, just the way that I can see that she's very human, but also very caring at such a young age about people, nature. And that's, I don't know if I can really attribute that to myself, but it has been nice to see her development and really this just really strong sense of justice. So for me, I think that's been even more rewarding than me seeing her academic growth, which has also been phenomenal.
For us, trying to think of like a story or something, but like Gladys mentioned, there's just so many different things and moments where I'm like, yeah, this feels good and this is rewarding. I think one thing to mention is the time together. Although we definitely acknowledge when we need space together, or I'm gonna be in this room, and you can go in your room and do this thing. But having the time together, knowing that, you know, I'm been busy with work and school, and so having this time that feels protected and it's for us and we're able to spend more time together and do things, that's very rewarding. And so having to, in the past rely on school, and he would be in school, and me being okay with that as much as I could be, but also handling other responsibilities. It was hard to always find like the quality time that I wanted to have. And so now with homeschooling, it's rewarding just because that time feels more open and more for us, that we can, use it and do what we want with it. And so that's a rewarding piece. Coming home with, I just got like a bunch of shaving cream and clear glue and baking soda because, he's ready to do science and stuff. And so being really excited about that, that's nice because he's just like, oh, yay, can't wait to do it. And so that's rewarding. And also just the moments where I know he's being critical. And so it could be like a TV show he's watching or a book he's reading, and he'll come up to me and be like, I think this book is racist. And I'll be like, well, why? And then when he explains it to me, it's rewarding because I'm like, this is good because I want you to be able to, knowing that I'm not always aware of what he's taking in or is consuming, but him being able to be critical about all the different messages and be able to like realize that, okay, that's not true or that's racist, and being able to like point to it and not accept it as truth. I think that that's also rewarding, and that homeschooling allowed us to, really dive into that and need to be able to see it happening.
I would say for me, the most rewarding, I guess there'd be like 3 levels. Like the first would be like a ditto to like everything that Rachel and Gladys have said, just watching your children, watching their observing their development and the things that they're kind of the lessons that stick with them. And you see when it comes back up and like they've been mulling this over and they've, they understand it and they get it. And then on a, I guess like academic or like contextual kind of level, my youngest, just like everything he knows is a reward because he was not in the school system. Even though my oldest, he was only in for 2 years and it was like very early, there's always this little worm in there, but like, how much did he learn from school and how much was that like what we did with him, But my youngest, he's never been in the system. So like when I see him, rattling off sums to equations or he's like starting to read now, and I'm just like, yes, that was 100% like not the school system.
Yes.
And then I guess like the final and the most rewarding for me is like really the experience. And I think that, our group together is called Freedom Kilombo, and one of our message chat groups is Learning for Liberation. And so, just what does it mean to be free? And like this home learning experience is like a real freedom from like a lot of things, and it's like once you kind of tap out of one facet of this American society, it kind of like lets you see how you don't have to subscribe to many other things. And so, I'm free to do what I want and I'm free to not do what I don't want to do. There's times in our group schooling, we had an art show, and it was like Rachel does all of the art with them. And then like one day, I think maybe Gladys, or I don't remember who mentioned it, was like, wouldn't it be cool if we had an art show? And it was like, oh, why can't we? It was like, well, yeah, we could do this. And it was just like, damn, it was like, well, let's plan it. And we did that. And the same thing with a science fair. We was like, well, let's do a science fair. Like, like we can just do what we want to do. And so having that freedom to, in the same way, not do what we don't feel like doing. Wake up one day and my child, you know what? He's on 10. He's not feeling it. I just got to call, let the moms know, listen, he's not feeling it today. He's on one. You guys probably don't even want to be a part of that. We're going to see y'all tomorrow. And it's fine, and not having some guilt, like how many days have you been absent from school? And, is this in this record? And so it's just tapping out of that system. So having the freedom, the experience has given us freedom, not just in schooling, but like in so many other areas in our life, like kind of take control of your life.
what you just said is so deep, because, and it's also really scary for people, Aleatha, right? You know, it's so funny that we often talk about liberation and freedom, but the reality is the very idea of tapping out of the system is scary, because everything that we've learned has been about how do you succeed within the system? What will your role be within the system? So the very idea that we can live outside of that, it's foreign to most of us. And I think what's really great about what you all are doing is that, yes, you clearly have the academic stuff down. I've met Gladys's daughter, and she just blows me out of the water with how much she knows and what she can write. But it's bigger than that, right? It's about their consciousness, how they see themselves, how they see the world, how they understand how they can make a difference. So this was, I feel inspired by hearing what you all are doing. And I know that our listeners will also be inspired as well. Before we end, I want to go back to something I think Rachel mentioned about online resources. A lot of people out there will look at you and say, oh, okay, this sounds great. I'm inspired. Where do I start? Several of you have Instagram pages and social media, so I'm going to link that here so people can find you. But can you talk a little bit about the types of online resources that might be available for people who are new at this?
Well, one, if people are connected on social media, and particularly Facebook, there's a bunch of different homeschooling groups on Facebook, and Black homeschooling, African American homeschooling, melanated homeschooling. And so those spaces are a great way to get plugged in and ask questions. So people ask a bunch of questions in terms of like, oh, how should they might ask specifically, does anybody know of a curriculum that focuses on whatever? And people might drop links, or, you know, if they're having trouble and need a space to vent, then they can use that as like a online support community. And so those groups, and there's a search function too. So if you just wanted to search like science, you could come up and see like everything that was posted about science. And so that's one space that has a lot of resources, but also just Google. Like, depending on what you want, if you just type in, you know, if you want to find first grade worksheets for math, you know, you do that. And then you have a bunch of links that'll show different math problems or word problems. And again, you can just download that and that's what you want. Or you could just type up your own and personalize it with your kid and their interests and stuff. And so there are a lot of resources. We started making like a short resource list because some parents, a couple reached out just knowing that I'd homeschool, and so wanting to know about resources or what we might recommend. And so having just kind of like a list of certain websites or just some quick tips, you know, things to share. And so yeah, that was something that we compiled that we haven't really shared widely. It was just more so in terms of if somebody asked, then yeah, here's something that we have. But there are a lot of websites, and like Gladys mentioned, Kumon, there's different things that you can buy, but a lot of it is just trying to search. And we use a lot of like using the library, just relying on books. And so pulling from books. And so maybe not searching online or using a curriculum, but drawing a lot of our learning from whatever this text whatever is inside of this text. And so using that, I don't know if you both have something to add on to that.
Yeah, so I would just add to what Rachel just said. There are a lot of online resources. So there's Khan Academy, there's Eureka Math. I mean, some people have full textbooks online for free. I have a combination, right? So I have some books that I ordered from Amazon. And then later on, my sister was like, oh yeah, they use that at my son's school or whatever. But even with that, I'm very flexible. So, you know, for example, my daughter just completed first grade, but we've been using a second and now a third grade math book. And she also does Kumon. So Kumon, they do, you know, you were asking about kind of evaluation. So with Kumon, you are going up different levels. So, you know, I know where she is. But again, Rachel mentioned, you know, sometimes you might have gaps in learning, right? So she's doing a lot of division, multiplying large numbers, but still I might assign her some subtraction that I know is easy, but I still want to make sure, that she has those fundamentals. And then also the other thing, I mentioned earlier how I was concerned, oh, she's not doing enough geography. I ordered a book, and a lot of these books, they will also say in line with Common Core. So this book was talking about Abraham Lincoln was a good person. I had to black that stuff out. And for me, I'm like, she's going to read the textbook that I assigned for my undergrads. When we learn about Abraham Lincoln, she's going to learn about Abraham Lincoln. She's going to learn that he was anti-Black. So again, I think even when you have these materials, if they, it doesn't matter if they're online or from, workbooks that you order, you still have to be very intentional to make sure that what, you're teaching them, you still want it, again, to be Black-centered. And for me, I want her to know kind of the standard knowledge, but I want her to know it in a critical way, right? So I don't want her to leave thinking that Abraham Lincoln was a great person. She needs to know the truth. And so that's just also something, to keep in mind when parents are looking for these online curriculum and things like that. They're going to have it, but it may not be what you want to teach your children.
Mm-hmm. Aleatha, did you want to add anything, or?
Yeah, sorry. I was just gonna add, just how Rachel was talking about, like, how if you think of it and you search online, like, it exists. Like, one example was we were doing like review. So I told you I did a like Black profiles this year. And so last year when we did Black countries, I myself made a Jeopardy game and blah, blah. And so this time, at this point in the year, we were virtual. So I couldn't make a physical Jeopardy game the same way I did last year. I needed like a virtual one, and hope like, maybe something that I could just click and then the questions will show. And I mean, at this point, we usually do our plannings on Sunday. So I had from like Sunday to Thursday, and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be able to make this game. And I was just like, let me just check online. And so I go on Google and I'm looking up like Black History Jeopardy, Black Jeopardy, African American. And I literally found the African American History Jeopardy PowerPoint with like all of the tools and like doodads, click here, the question shows. It was like perfect. It was a little bit outdated for our children's ages, but it was there. And that's been my experience. I actually enjoy lesson planning, and I enjoy making worksheets. And when we started last year, I would literally make the worksheets, even like for my youngest, maybe like get the clip art with the donuts and count this. I would make it and I would feel so accomplished. And then I really had to kind of start looking at it like, the same way you think about a lawyer billing their time, like, was the output really worth the effort that you just put into making that worksheet?
Yeah.
It is available. It exists. You do it, like, you wasted so much time. So even though that is something I enjoy doing, I really had to learn that tough lesson and chalk it up. Like, don't do that. It's done for you already, over and over. Some of the resources that I like to use is education.com. I don't have a membership, but for free, you get like a certain amount, maybe 4 or 5 downloads a month. And I just make sure before the month end, I go on there and I just pull some resources. There's another one, I think it's called teachersherper.com. And it's the same thing. You have a certain amount of free downloads a month, and I'll go on there and I'll pull the resources. So at first I was mainly doing it. Oh, also Teacher Pay Teacher is amazing, because they send out, if you sign up for the emails, they send out 10 freebies every week. And you can also go onto the site and download any, like, there's so many free resources that you don't have to pay for. So when I was starting my homeschool journey, I was like deep down the YouTube rabbit hole, watching homeschooling families. Like, what are they doing? What do I need to do? How do we do this? And it was the best advice I would say I got was, do not buy a curriculum. If you are just starting out homeschooling, do not buy a curriculum because you're probably going to scrap it. And I was like, that sounds right up my alley. Save some money. Okay. So that was my challenge to myself the first year, was like, don't buy a curriculum, because my personality is buy all the things, have the matching set complete. Like, so I was like, all right, I'm not going to buy a curriculum. I'm going to do this as cheap and as free as possible and like see. And so that's kind of been working out for us, and we've been piecemealing it along with like maybe some workbooks, or maybe it's really mostly been workbooks and like activity books, or like subject matter books that we got from the library and stuff, and we just piece it together along with the online resources that are out there for free.
Yeah. No, this is really helpful. And what I'll do, I'll make sure in the description of the video that I include some of these links to some of this free material for those of you who are thinking about this. I just want to say thank you, Gladys, Rachel, and Aleatha, for giving us this look into your lives as part of this group, Freedom Kilombo. If there's contact information for folks who want to learn more about the Freedom Kilombo, is that okay if they contact you all? Is there some type of social media presence we could maybe give to our viewers? Because I know people are going to want to learn more about this, and maybe even contact you personally to follow up on some of the things that you've said. So thank you so much for being part of this episode of Sweeter the Juice. I might have to have you all back. I mean, there were actually other questions I wanted to delve into, but we've already spent over an hour talking, and I know you have things to get back to, and I have a daughter upstairs too. So I just want to thank you again for being part of the show, and we look forward to hearing not only feedback about how Freedom Kilombo develops, but also from our viewers who might be able to benefit from this information. So thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
See, you cannot watch that interview and not be inspired. There was so much good information, and you can get much more of it by visiting their Instagram pages. But just to recap, a few of my favorite highlights from this interview. Number 1, anti-racism and Black affirmation is about teaching Black history, not just in the United States, but across the diaspora. It's also about normalizing Blackness. As Aleatha says, Blackify everything. Number 2, they say don't try to replicate school. In fact, they're trying to de-school by not having such a rigid or narrow approach to learning. They also recommend that you teach to your child's interests. If your child likes science and math, those are the things that you should focus on during your day. They also say that you can find a community and use online resources to connect to other folks. And then lastly, protect your own mental health and find moments of joy throughout your day. Ultimately, what these women want for their kids is what we all want for our children, and that's liberation. This is exactly what Marcus Garvey meant when he said we are going to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, because whilst others might free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind. That concludes this episode of Sweeter the Juice. Leave me a message about what you think of this video, what you think about homeschooling, what you think about the interview with these women, and most importantly, if you like what you saw here and you want more of it, you know what to do. Click on this link below to subscribe. Until the next time, live the good life, live the sweet life.